Good evening. I would like to call to order the February 13th, 2023 D303 School Board meeting at 6:01 p.m. Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll?
Yes, Mrs. Barker is absent today. Mrs. Bell?
Here.
Mr. Kuchert?
Here.
Mr. Lackner?
Here.
Mrs. McCabe?
Here.
Mr. McNally?
Here.
And Mrs. Fairgrave?
Here. Please stand for the pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, and I would first like to, I believe we have some representatives from our Anderson Elementary School.
Yeah, Anderson Elementary School, come on up. This week, Random Acts of Kindness kicks off for this week. The week highlights random acts of kindness around our community. Many students and staff are participating in a variety of activities to show appreciation to individuals, groups of people, businesses around our community. And tonight, we're super fortunate to have Anderson Elementary join us for one of their acts of kindness. So come on up and talk to us.
Elementary students wanted to spread some kindness, and so we are spreading joy. We have some little trial sizes of hand sanitizer to spread joy, not germs. And so we would like to be able to give some, if we miss some of you coming in, we'd like to be able to pass that on and give you one and then take one to spread on to someone else. So just wanted to spread some joy and thank you for all that you do.
Thank you very much.
Come on up.
I don't know who, if you just want to maybe raise your hand if you didn't get one, that would be.
All right.
They can, that way they would know. Yeah, pass them on out. Anybody hearing this? We got everybody here.
Thank you so much.
You're so sweet.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for coming. Way to spread joy.
Okay. That was very nice. Thank you very much. Now item number 2 back on the agenda is citizen comments. We do not have any citizen comments at this time. So with that, we will move on to item number 3 on the agenda, which is reports to the board, starting with the superintendent's report.
Thank you so much. Tonight, we're gonna continue with our celebrations. Mr. Jim Richter is here from St. Charles East to celebrate Susan Brenner. Come on up.
Good evening, and thank you for having us here this evening. This is Susan Brenner, and we are here to celebrate Susan, who was named the Illinois 2A Assistant Tennis Coach of the Year for the state, which is a really big. And our girls tennis program is one of our largest athletic programs. At one point, we had about 80 participants in that sport, which is a huge number for tennis. And a lot of that has to do with the culture and the atmosphere they create as part of that program. And Susan is a really big part of that. And we're really proud to have her here to recognize her for this recognition today.
Way to go. Thank you so much for what you do for our students each and every day. Thank you. Bye. The next piece up, we want to continue the celebration of our staff members who've renewed their national board certification. This is a really important certification that our staff immerse themselves in. This is an intense program that highlights the best of teaching practices. Lindsay Amazochi, Andrew Johnson, Denise Leatherman, Lindsay Mayday, Rory Pine, Julia Sanderson, Sharon Stewart, Scott Van Eesen, Kristen Williams, and Michael Zernone. Again, this is a really great accomplishment for our staff to achieve the national board certification. That the amount of time and energy that goes into this type of certification really highlights and exemplifies the best of our educators. So huge congratulations to that group and to all of our other national board certified teachers out there. Thank you. Last week was National Counseling Week. The work our counselors do in our district and counselors do across the country, I think have been highlighted through the pandemic and after the pandemic. The work that they're doing, connecting with our students, really understanding where our students are at, where they're going, and really helping our when they move into the high school, really helping our students make the really great decisions about college, career, and their futures. Just incredibly proud of our counselors throughout our district and the impact they're making on our students. So we have that piece, and I think that is it for my celebrations. And then I'm going to get into quickly. We had our some community members may be aware, we had a book reconsideration for the Home After Dark. The committee discussed the individual specific concerns regarding Home After Dark, specifically the pages 280 and 281, and concluded the following: the drawings support the storytelling. It is not salacious, and its purpose is not intended to cause sexual excitement or arousal, a quick, intense reaction. The community member parent was concerned about the image. The story does not identify the female in the drawing as an adult, rather it allows the reader to infer. The book is only available in high school libraries, and the subject matter is appropriate for grades 9 through 12. The requester also asked the committee to consider policy 7315, restrictions on publications, high schools. This policy only governs student generated publications and does not fall within this consideration. I appreciate the community member who brought that forward to us for us reviewing it from the learning and teaching side of the house, but ultimately the committee made up of district staff, parent, administration, made the decision to keep Home After the Dark in our library. And again, difference from a mandatory read for our students at the high school level. This is not, this is in the library for individual students to check that out. Moving on to our data dashboard, our continued review of our of the data dashboard that the board and administration developed. If you remember from last month, we identified the third graders reading on grade level. This month, it is for eighth graders on track to pass Algebra 1. This number is 39.9. Now, this indicates those students, the number of students who are in those honors courses. So we have 39, basically 40% of our students who are in that track, earning a C or better. As we heard at our last meeting, we have a larger group of fifth grade students who are moving into that track in sixth grade. So we're excited already about the change in the trajectory of growing that number. The other area that we highlighted here that was not reported out last month is the ninth graders on track to graduate. We're at 96%, and this is a percent of students who have no more than one F in a core class. We know the research behind this. When students fail their core classes, they will fail to graduate on time. Under the operations, our operating cash balance is at 55% of budgeted revenues. Our continued network uptime continues to be at 99%. Our facility access continues to be at 99% as well. The attendance continues to hold basically where it was last month. right in that 25% overall for percent of students who have missed 10% or more of school for any reason, whether excused or unexcused. So that each month, we will highlight different aspects of our data dashboard, and we'll bring that to the board's attention. And this will also be uploaded tomorrow morning in the board document. All right, let's get to the strategic planning committee. I'm just going to wait for a PowerPoint to pop up here. Okay. The strategic planning committee has been hard at work for a few months now. We meet on about twice a month basis to really move our work forward. So I want to take the board and the community through some of the work that we're doing. Here are the committee members. We have students, we have certified and classified staff members, we have board members, and we have administration, from school administration to district administrators on this committee. Really thankful for all of these committee members. They've done incredible work, as our board members can attest to, Ms. Bell, Mr. McNally, the hard conversations that are had, and the conversations that continue to go on at those meetings. So kind of setting the timeline down, we are really looking for the strategic plan to be in the board's hands in May. So backwards planning from that, we have some work that still needs to be done, but tonight we're going to show you some of that work where we're at. One of the big pieces of this feedback loop is after tonight's board meeting, we're going to be getting other feedback by different groups throughout the district. So tonight is really that overall update for the board as to where we're at and then where we're going. We work from a theory of action. D303's theory of action is how we will realize our commitment for excellence for each student. District office. If the district office does these pieces, then principals and instructional leaders will do their work. Teachers and support staff, this will all support our teachers and our staff to do the work highlighted there, and then which will allow our students, each student, to graduate college and career ready, achieve at the high levels of results of actively engaging in rigorous instruction, seeing themselves in their learning, using their voice, and feeling a sense of ownership, safety, and belonging. So we'll use this theory of action all throughout. And again, it holds us accountable throughout the organization for doing the work that we're going to be setting out within this plan. So excited about all of this. The board will remember these. The core values have been and will continue to be the heart of this strategic plan. What I hope you will see, board members and community, will be opportunity to see these core values in every component of our strategic plan. Hopefully you'll see where belonging, perseverance, and achievement, that these definitions, belonging, we honor the dignity of each person by accepting, validating, and appreciating them, and by treating every individual fairly. Perseverance, we face and overcome challenges by being determined and resilient and encouraging one another to develop effective, sustainable solutions. In achievement, we establish high standards and leverage our talents, time, and resources to produce exceptional work, engage in continuous improvement, and attain ambitious goals. So again, like I said, these core values will be woven throughout all of our strategic plan. The commitment. Our group worked incredibly hard on this commitment. We went from a vision to a promise to really settling in on this term called a commitment. Together, building pathways to excellence. I want to highlight a couple pieces here. When we look at belonging, we look at this idea of together. That's what's inferred within this together, that we are in this together. But to be together, you have to belong. You have to be willing to be a part of this, and that we bring each and every person to this table. Together are our staff, our students, the board, our families, and our community. We see this as a collective commitment across the board. When we look at perseverance, you'll see perseverance in building the pathways. Again, there's going to be work where we're going to have to continue to work at this to ensure that we have these pathways down, that we will find obstacles in our way. There will be barriers at times, but we have to find pathways to excellence. And again, the excellence, that achievement piece. We establish high standards, leverage our time, talents, and resources to produce exceptional work, engage in continuous improvement, and attain ambitious goals. So this commitment is a real power punch. It has a lot of meaning within it. Just the statement itself is powerful, but seeing the underlying work behind it tells also a deeper, richer story of where we're going and the pathways in which we're going to be able to achieve that. The board is aware of the profile of the graduate. A lot of this work was right before I started in July, and then we finished this work up a little bit after that. But again, to prepare each student to be an empathetic citizen, critical thinker, effective communicator, adaptive learner, and a self-directed learner. These aspects are somewhat of that mission. This is what we hope that each of our students becomes when they walk out of D303 with that diploma. That means so much. To be each one of these would be a profile of a D303 graduate. Let me talk to you a little bit about strategic priorities. So again, these are the big buckets in which we're going to do a lot of our work. For us, effective collaboration is key. It's one of the most important things that we're going to be doing when we work together. People work interdependently to positively affect student learning and take collective responsibility for the outcomes of District 303, students, staff, families, and our community. Again, I'll show you some other connecting points here in a moment. Instructional coherence. Every component of the student academic experience is tightly aligned and designed to advance core grade level and beyond instruction. We build academic and social emotional supports that prepare the way for and extend grade level learning. The last one is culture of dignity. All people hold an immense value that's tied solely to their humanity. It has nothing to do with a label or any other factor other than them being human. Within these three overarching priorities, what will occur from here are the strategic priority action steps. These will break it down a step further. So under effective collaboration, we'll establish highly effective professional learning communities. We'll maintain strong fiscal stewardship of taxpayer resources. Number three, purposely engage families and community for the benefit of students. Under instructional coherence, ensure a guaranteed and viable curriculum which is representative of students and is aligned to grade level standards. Number two, utilize evidence-based instructional practices that are responsive to each student and include grade level and beyond learning activities and assignments. Number three, engage in and implement professional learning to advance core grade level and beyond instruction that supports the values, commitments, and priorities of D303. The culture of dignity to ensure equitable policies, programs, and infrastructures that promote access, excellence, and accountability. Number two, create learning environments that support the social and emotional well-being of students and staff. And number three, attract, develop, and retain effective, caring, and culturally competent staff members. This work, you will see tie-ins from our values all the way through here, from the belonging, the perseverance, and the achievement. You will see those values represented in this work. This work will be the driving force of our organization and how we're going to improve the outcomes, the social and emotional and academic outcomes of our students, pre-K, 12, and our transition program. We have success indicators. At the end of the day, if we do all of this right, if we do this exceptionally well, this read on grade level or beyond by third grade, measured by the state assessments. Graduate with early career credit or industry credentials. This is really an important one because oftentimes we only pay lip service to the college and career. This is an opportunity for us to recognize those young people who, one, also graduate, they're ready to earn college credit without remedial programs at the college level. We know when young people take college remedial courses in college, one, those are not going towards any credit bearing. They're costly and they come back and haunt a family over time. It's really hard to take those courses, those, level 100 courses without getting any credit for them and then getting into that course that actually does have credit bearing responsibility. The other piece is the industry credentials. Again, not every one of our students are headed towards college, but we should be recognizing those who are getting the industry credentials. It's really an important piece for us. Next, demonstrate proficiency in Algebra 1 by the end of grade 9. Report a sense of belonging, and then be ready for kindergarten. Each one of these very large overarching one connect all the way through our organization. So if you look at the read on grade level by third grade, it's putting emphasis in our early education, our K, 1, and 2. It's really hard to catch students up anytime they're behind. So again, we're seeing that ability to truncate other underneath these larger overarching success indicators. To graduate with early college credit or industry credentials, that works throughout the entire organization. When students become behind, when they leave elementary school behind, when they leave middle school behind, it will be incredibly challenging not to have some remediation in college. So that filters throughout our entire organization. Pre-K, 12. Demonstrate proficiency in Algebra 1 by the end of 9th grade. We know the gatekeepers for college and other outcomes is Algebra 1. And we know by the end of grade 9, our students must be proficient in that area. We know the research around the sense of belonging for students. Our students must feel connected, must know that our staff members are there for them, can support them and move them forward. This is, as measured by the student survey, focused on belonging and teacher-student relationships. I have a superintendent student advisory council, and one of the questions I asked them 2 weeks ago are, talk to me about your most rigorous classes and when are they very successful? Every one of them, right out of the gate, it was always about that teacher. And I said, okay, talk to me about that AP Calc course. And it's really hard and it's really challenging and you're struggling. And one of the students said, that's me. I'm in that. And I said, why is this working so well? Because of the teacher. It's this teacher. I know I trust this teacher. This teacher has this focus on me and I know where it's at. Even in our most rigorous courses, our teachers, our students know when our teachers have that type of relationship with them, and it matters to our students. The research bears it out, and so does our students when you sit and talk to them about that. Be ready for kindergarten. This is another big measurement for us by the kids' assessment. We know when our 3 and 4-year-olds come to us ready, there's again that less of catch up. There's more opportunities to do really great things with our kindergartners. This really speaks to our early childhood and making sure that our young people are ready to enter school and to do school. So these are the big success indicators that we're looking for. Again, a lot of data is going to be truncated under that. Some of that data will also come from a lot of the on track indicators that the board had set. You'll see if you kind of pull those pieces out, you will start seeing, oh, look, all of these will fit under this one and this one and this one. So we really made sure there was a through line from that document to this document and really working that forward. So where we're at is in this feedback loop. Our next steps as a strategic team will be to review all the feedback throughout the next phase of the process and make necessary adjustments to the plan. The other piece that we're going to be doing is district school leaders and teacher leaders will begin developing the action steps to achieve the values, the commitments, and the priorities. What does that look like? It looks like a lot of feedback. So this is not a done document. This is now in a form where we're ready to send it out to different groups, leadership group, seek a review and feedback of the current structure of the strategic plan. That will come back to the strategic plan. We'll review, make adjustments. We'll send this out to staff with the updated information from leadership. It'll come back to strategic plan. This will then, we'll clean that up and then we'll bring this back to the board. So you see the iterations of this, that we're really kicking into the feedback loop. So our staff really has a deep understanding of this plan and where we're going and being able to hear all those different ideas and different feedback we're looking for. So again, you'll go through it. After number 9, again, we're going to review all that feedback and then we're going to send it out to our families for their review and giving us feedback. And then we'll come back to the board again, somewhere in that late April, early May, review the overall plan and set date for the approval. So this is, again, this is not a completed document. This is a document that we feel like is in a good place to move forward and start gathering more feedback and more insights into where we're going and the direction of the district with the strategic plan. Thank you. I'm sure there are no questions. Board, do you have any questions?
I do. I was interested in, it looks like for the success measures that there's a shift that's being proposed related to algebra in particular, because for the last few years, we've really been moving toward algebra in 8th grade and having a higher percentage there.
Correct. But we feel like by the end of night, so we're going to still continue that piece in 8th grade that they have that, but not every student is going to be in that honors track. So what we want to make sure is that we're recognizing these young people who are in the honors track. We've increased that to 55%.
I believe we're at 55%.
55%
Current 6th graders.
for the current 6th graders. But with that indication, we want to make sure that each of our students have that algebra ready by the end of 9th grade, as opposed to just our students who are in the honors track. We want more and more there. However, we know that some students are going to need a little bit more time to be able to get that. And we feel like by the end of 9th grade, you're still on track for rigorous coursework as well.
So at what point, I guess I would want to understand more, because we weren't really, from my recollection and participation in the discussions, we weren't really necessarily thinking of it as an honors track, but actually it would be a fundamental shift in how we approach math, and that it would be more of our standard in 8th grade. And part of that being so that they could be as prepared as possible if they were college driven, to be able to have as much success as possible with the SAT as a junior.
We can go back and have further conversations on it.
Okay.
That's
And-
literally what this is.
Okay.
Is that feedback opportunity time.
Yeah, that would be, at least that's my perspective.
Yeah.
And so I would be interested in just the context
Love it.
around.
Thank
that.
you.
I totally agree. That was the one piece. But I am happy to hear that we're at 55%. That's a much higher number than we are now, but it was also everything that Mrs. Fairgrieve said, I agree with. If you could go back, make it look, I'm saying the wrong words. It should be the standard that you are done with algebra at the end of 8th grade. And we know historically that there was a committee that decided how math should be taught at the turn of the other century. And there's no reason we have to maintain all of the same kinds of traditional pieces. If our elementary can do the work that's necessary, we understand that not every child is going to, anybody who's been through No Child Left Behind knows that there are kids who aren't. But if we say 9th grade, then that changes the direction. If we say 8th grade, then that means we're talking about it.
Fair. Thank you.
The only addendum to that would be that if the students are taking it in 8th grade, we need to assure that the rigor is exactly the same as it is in 9th grade. And that was, I think, probably the linchpin for much of the discussion in the past, is that there was concern about students kind of being passed along from 8th grade into high school, taking a second math course that they weren't maybe quite prepared for. So we just need to find a way to assure that happens.
And again, for some young people, the time for some of them to be able to accomplish that, there's not always just a finite, you're going to learn it by this time. So that was part of that recognition in there as well. Where we're currently at 40%, where we have students in the pipeline at 55%, is that larger understanding of where we want each of our students by the end. So it does not mean that we would drop this indicator either, but I hear what you're saying.
Well, this is really just a question. We've set a strong goal of being at grade level for 3rd grade reading. We know that's what it says. So we should know that math also has that kind of
Absolutely.
research behind it. If the research says, no, you don't need to know algebra till you're 21, that's a different kind of story. But we know it's a gatekeeper. And if we're interested in the rigor and the excellence of understanding math and being able to get through that gate, then we should really approach it with that.
We'll come back. I love the conversation.
I have a couple of points. I'll start with this one. Dr. Gordon, when you talked about your first review of curriculum, you talked a lot about the literacy curriculum in elementary school being insufficient. When I see a point like the one on slide 9 that says ensure a guaranteed, point 1 in the center column, ensure a guaranteed and viable curriculum that's aligned to grade level standards, one might ask the question of how big is the gap today between what's in the schools now and the presence of that guaranteed and viable curriculum. And so I don't expect an answer presently, but I would encourage the committee to consider that greatly and come back not only with a view of which parts of the curriculum require the most dire or are in most need of attention presently in almost a triage, but also to consider how long it will take and what it will take so that the board can understand the resources required to move D303 to the achievement of what's reflected in this document. So I would strongly encourage the team to bring back how much, how long, and what the budget implications would be. And when we find those places that are not yet delivering guaranteed and viable curriculum, how much it'll cost to drive that transition. I'd ask the administration to also bring back what other elements in our fixed revenue budget need to be removed in order to enable that move forward.
Absolutely, Mr. Lackner. We as Dr. Igo and I partner with the strategic plan and the equity plan, we are highlighting those curricular areas, those areas of some deficiency that we know of, especially in the areas of literacy and numeracy. That's where we're putting a lion's share of our focus right now to make sure that those two areas are shored up. I think we've been pretty honest about some of those areas of weakness. We are now, as reported in our last committee meeting, seeing some significant progress in the early math because of that adoption. We're starting to see the fruits of that piece. But I hear exactly what you're saying. We'll be bringing that back. Or do you want to highlight anything right now, Dr. Arrigo?
Just to know that we are definitely looking through that, and it's really about us making sure that we have that PLC process is going to help when we start to talk about what proficiency looks like. But those are all conversations we're having.
Yeah, and that work actually will be starting in our schools in the coming weeks, where we're identifying those priority standards and really engaging our staff in those areas in both math and literacy right now. So we're already, as we're working through the strategic plan, we're also pushing to do some of the elements within the plan itself. Other questions?
One other question or issue area. On slide 7, we have a picture of the profile of graduate. I think that's a unnecessary and insufficient promise to the graduates of the district. All the things that are represented in that current profile of the graduate are laudable, and each person who leaves the district should have those as potential attributes. I think the challenge for us at the table here is that we cannot invest in every program. And so when I contrast slide 7 with the second measure on slide 10, which is graduate with early college credit or industry credits, I look at those two things and say any graduate can have what's on slide 7. There are specific programs of action that are required in order for us to achieve what's reflected on slide 10. And so I would really encourage the group to think about multiple profiles of graduates so that we can start to think about, in terms of curriculum, what is it in which the district should invest in order to provide maximum optionality. In a previous board meeting, we had a discussion about data that suggested 80% of students in the high schools expect to go to college. We know that that number will vary over time, but it's been so far pretty consistent. So when I look at those three things in succession, 80% college bound or ambition to go to college, I look at a fact like what's on 10, and then I look at the profile of the graduate. There are very specific content things that are required of graduates. President Fairgrave talked a little bit about the math indicators and being prepared for standardized tests for those who are college bound. If 80% are college bound, and we know algebra is a gateway to being prepared for the test, or algebra 2 is, we need to have alignment associated with those things. And so I just would ask the team to go back and reconsider the profile of a graduate and say, in addition to what's reflected here, what are the content requirements that describe an effective graduate from D303 that maximizes that graduate's optionality and selection of choice? And when do we have to have those in place?
Thank you for that. Other feedback?
There are people who have come to the microphone and said, just teach reading, writing, and arithmetic. And I have said more than once, everybody's been to school and everybody knows what school looks like, but the whole piece of instruction is so much more complex and complicated than we know when we're not in that role. So I'm wondering how we will equate the belonging piece to the teaching of the content and the rigor that is needed, because I'm concerned. I personally like what I see here, but I'm concerned that the community may see it as hugging trees, and all we do is make it nice for kids, and we're not doing the rigor. So can you speak to that and how we'll approach it?
Yeah, I think the rigor jumps out and the strategic plan. I think it is absolutely there. It was a center point to both of our board members and the committee that instructional rigor, that grade level and beyond, the implementation of professional learning, all of those pieces really speak to the high quality instruction and learning that our students will achieve. We also know the importance of ensuring that each student belongs. It was way back when the board selected these core values. It was the board who recognized how important belonging was for our young people. I think these values, if you work from the values out, you will see those connections. And when the Board of Education speaks and these are our values, I think it tells you where we're at, that belonging is going to be a critical aspect of who we are. We know as humans, we're social creatures. We want to have that connection. We need that connection. We thrive for that connection. When you sit with students and you talk to them like I do, they tell you the same thing. I have to be connected in order to be able to engage in this learning. When I'm not connected, when I don't feel safe, when safe means from, I want to be able to raise my hand and offer up an idea that I have on mathematics or social studies or art, that do I feel like I can put out my thinking, be it correct or incorrect? Because what we do know about the brain really does well when we actually struggle, when we have purposeful struggle. But students have to feel like they're connected and they belong to that classroom. They belong to that core. They belong to that school to be able to raise their hand. And that we have educators who are creating an environment where students know they ask those questions and they put themselves out there, where they come into school being able to be their authentic self, which is hard. As a former middle school educator, one of the most challenging times in young people's lives is in that adolescent period. And you're just trying to belong with your friends. You're trying to belong somewhere. You're trying to connect. Those are critical points in our kids' lives, as well as our families' lives, when our kids are making that transition from elementary to middle school and then middle school to high school. All of our young people, all of our staff, our community must belong. And I believe the board way back then knew that as well. And then when you look at perseverance, we face and overcome challenges. The board is literally saying we have to overcome challenges. It's hard work to overcome challenges, but you have to belong. To overcome challenges, you have to belong. Be determined and resilient and encourage one another to develop effective, sustainable solutions. And I love the achievement. We establish high standards and leverage our talents, time, and resources to produce exceptional work, engage in continuous improvement, and attain ambitious goals. But the committee believes, I believe the board, you have to have that foundation of connection and human, that idea on this slide around the basic sense of human dignity, that we treat each human with that sense of dignity and purpose, and why we put these three measures under them, that we have policies and procedures and infrastructure and programs that promotes access, excellence, and accountability, that we create learning environments that support the social and emotional well-being of our students, and that we attract staff that get it. They had to be in some order, and we do this. All three are critical. Those three priorities, they're critical buckets that connect directly to the values, that connect directly to the commitment of the district of where we're at. And again, I'm anxious to get the feedback loops rolling and get, just like the board's feedback to us, get the leadership feedback, get the staff's feedback, and then get our families' feedback on this as well. Because this is a draft. This is our best thinking as we sat here today. And every time I'm with it, quite honestly, I make little tweaks. I mean, Sunday morning at 9:30 in the morning, I was like tweaking a few things here and there, because you see different things in our community, our staff and our families. And the board will continue to see things and keep giving us feedback like you did tonight. That was a really long-winded answer to your question.
Can I offer just a follow-up on that?
Please.
Because I appreciate the passion in your long-winded answer. It was it was really positive. You know, when I see slides 8, 9, and 10 together, I do see a lot of focus on rigorous outcomes, particularly in the instructional coherence. And one of the things, when you talk about tweaking this, when I look at the success measures, and they're rightly so student focused, they're all about student outcomes, and I appreciate that. At the same time, there's an opportunity to talk about the ways in which we invest in teachers. If we know that the magic is at the teacher-student relationship, as you've described rightly from your student group,
Mhm.
then maybe we ought to be thinking about a balanced scorecard that's inclusive of measuring how we invest in teachers and how that might shift and change over time. I see it in the PLC comments, but I don't see it in the measures.
Oh, I see what you're saying, because you're right. Under instructional coherence, better put on my glasses, that engage in, implement professional learning to advance core level. So yeah, we can call that out even better, because there is a lot of work where I would want our district to be known as is a true coaching district, where we're growing our staff. Our staff know my goofy little saying, you know, we got to grow our big people before we can grow our little people. And this is one of those areas that we can highlight in a different way under an indicator of success, because you're absolutely right, Mr. Lackner. We do what we know, and to continue growing, we, administration, the superintendent, have to make sure there's pathways for our staff to continue to grow and to learn. So I like the idea of putting a success indicator in there. Others? Or have I talked you out? All right, we'll move on to the Equity Committee update. Dr. Igo is here. And again, before I hand it over, because I feel like I haven't spoken enough, the equity plan and the strategic plan, they will be merged at some point. As the equity work continues to move forward, we will see alignment, because what we really want is one document, one strategic plan that truly drives our work going forward. So you'll already start to see some aspects starting to find their way into the strategic plan. Dr. Igo?
Certainly. So as Dr. Gordon just mentioned, what we really did, and you can already actually see it because we spent some time doing this, taking the 4 kind of initiatives, those 4 strategic initiatives that we talked about in here, and we placed them into the strategic plans. One of the things we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure, do these fit and how do they work? But our committee's been meeting over the first half of the semester. And we've really done some nice work where we were able to identify like what are the things that we need, and kind of like we've got priorities, we identified some foundational components, which I'd call kind of like that through line of belonging, opportunities, and meaningful participation. And so the research really tells us, as we're thinking about equity, those are where we need to be putting and thinking about how do we organize. So as we look at that first strategic initiative that's in the right up there, it says to design and implement high quality curriculum, assessment, and instruction that's reflective of and responsive to each student. As we are thinking about what are the action steps for that, we would be thinking about what is it that we need to include in our curriculum, instruction, and assessment to ensure that students feel like they belong. And that looks to kind of build on the question you asked. Certainly it's about building relationships with students, but it's also about ensuring that there's representation, that they see themselves and their families positively represented in the curriculum, resources, and materials that we use. That's an important part of belonging. Another important part of belonging is having high expectations. I absolutely assume that you can do this, and I'm going to hold you to the standard. That is belonging. That is how we build in rigorous and we keep our focus on belonging. Opportunities and is really about access. How are we making sure our students have access? So again, as we're thinking through design and implement high quality instruction, we're thinking about what are the opportunities that we need to make sure that not only does every student have access, but they also have the support that they need in order to be successful. So that would be a key piece as we look through each of those. And then meaningful participation. And meaningful participation is that students they have agency and voice. probably kind of goes hand in hand with belonging, but that idea that everybody's a meaningful and valued and contributing member to the learning community. And so as we look through each of these, how do we make sure that we have that for implementing high quality instruction, fostering reciprocal and inclusive relationships, and then ensuring equitable policies, and then making sure we have attracted and developed and retained, culturally responsive and caring staff. So through that, we're going to take those components, we kind of run them down the side and the strategic commitments across the top. But as we're building, what are those action steps? We're thinking about how do we make sure we've included these things? Because those are kind of the key values to kind of moving forward. We also identified some success indicators and really focused our success indicators on the success of students, right? At the end of the day, we can put all kinds of things in place for students and we can implement them with 100% perfection. But if it doesn't result in better outcomes for kids, then we need to go back to the drawing board and rethink. So we really kind of talked through what are the things we need from kids. And then at the same time, really thinking about how do we make sure we've got some implementation indicators along the way? How do we are holding ourselves accountable to putting some of those things in place? But really a focus on ELA and math proficiency and really focused on making sure every student is proficient or hits the proficient standard, right? That's our goal. Not that we're closing a gap, it's that every single kid is proficient. And what do we need to do to make that happen? That our discipline referrals and exclusionary data are also proportional, that we've got enrollment and successful completion of those advanced classes, attendance, and again, that sense of belonging. So you can start to see how some of these things are going to naturally kind of intertwine, as well as involvement in extracurricular activities. So really those big 6, 5, I can't remember where we landed, success indicators kind of start at the top. And then these will probably feed into that along the way. But we'll continue to refine that. But again, this is also a work in progress. This is this is the work of the committee. It goes now to, we'll take some feedback from you, then it'll go out to our teachers and our staff to get some feedback, go back to the committee to fine tune and organize, then come back here as part of the finalized strategic plan. Can I answer any questions?
So when we roll out the strategic plan, we aren't rolling out a separate equity document. And I think that we should be pretty clear because I think folks are expecting an equity rollout or a way of a document that shows what the work was and why and how. So I think that would be something that we need to consider so that so folks can see what has been done because people are waiting to hear.
Yeah, we'll make sure that
Like
a
a
lot of
document.
communication with that.
Here's the document of here's the work of the committee, and then here's how it fits into the strategic plan. Yeah, and we had kind of talked about in the strategic plan, kind of calling it out, equity looks like, so that we make sure we continue to roll that through. I don't know if that's the right word or the right place, but just some way of calling out as we look at each of these.
As we're getting into kind of those that midpoint of both of these, this is that time that we'll be able to have a better sense of where things will start fitting within the overarching strategic plan and how that will line up as our thinking is starting to become visible to the board, to the community. It's coming visible to us, so where we're able to better align all those different pieces and then start developing our communication on this as well.
So I have one more thought. As this work is going on, the folks who are involved in the process are thinking and doing and maybe changing practice or thought or their mindset. Are there things that are coming from both committees that you see administration or the board or the instructional teams could be doing now instead of waiting till all the feedback and all?
Yeah, we're already. I mean, I mentioned one earlier. Probably our most important thing that we're doing right now is developing that guaranteed and viable curriculum. That has to be our foundational work. So in the coming weeks, we're going to be working with our principals, coaches at the building level, and really getting ready to work with our staff around the priority standards for both math and literacy. That is going to be, again, the foundation from which we work from in those two content areas. Our goal is to have that work completed by early June and starting to really move that work through into our organization for next school year. So we're already doing the work. We're working with our leaders around professional learning communities. What does that look like, sound like, and feel like? And I recognize every district in the country has done some form of professional learning communities. We're going to do this at a different level of where we're at. We know the roughly 25, 30 years of research, and the research is clear. Our educators make a significant difference in the lives of our students. But when we bring the collective efficacy of a group of teachers together, their power becomes immense in the work they're doing. The other aspect we'll be having on here over time will be regular opportunities for our staff to be our teachers to be looking at student learning, the assessment data, bringing forward student work, because that informs me about our instruction. So again, a long-winded answer to say yes. We're already moving things forward and doing them very intentionally that are represented in the strategic plan and in the equity plan. Because as the board was very clear to me in our July retreat, we must move from a good to a great district. And we must get moving as soon as you are feeling like we can. And we, both Dr. Igo, myself, our leaders, we're in a good space right now. It took me a little bit of time to get my feet on the ground to understand our district. And I don't know it completely, but I have a really good sense of where we're at because I have amazing administrators and educators throughout this district. We're starting. We don't have time to waste. We just don't, because our young people are looking to us to improve their outcomes each and every day. And I really feel like that's what we're laying.
And the only thing I would say, we've got the PLCs and that's about to get up and running, but we've also been doing all this ELA work, at least K-8. And that will also, we're field testing currently, and we're getting ready to roll that out. And we are seeing, like, it's really fun to be with our educators that are field testing. You can feel their energy. So as we then pair this with the PLCs, I think we're going to start to see some really good stuff. So there's two things that are really happening at the same time that will absolutely be in place for the start of next school year.
All right. That is enough airtime for Paul Gordon.
Okay.
Because people wanted to hear a little bit more from me. Listen, mainly because I forgot it. Listen, learn, return. We've had great opportunities with our listen, learn, and return program and sessions. On February 1st, we had 2 sessions with our parents, our community, some staff members who came in all under operations. And really the focus was on overcrowding in our schools. Real great opportunity to interact with, again, both those groups. In the morning, we had roughly 15 individuals come out. In the evening, I think we had 55 people come out and really, again, engage on this topic around operations. It was one of the largest, it was one of the highest rated concerns that our community had around the work that we're doing within our schools, and specifically the overcrowding. And then on the staff side, Dr. Igo and the learning teaching team on February 9th really started to engage our elementary staff around student behaviors and concerns on I want to say the 16th? Thursday, the 16th. She'll engage the secondary educators on that same topic and really trying to understand a number of the concerns that were brought out through the in-person and the thought exchange. That's the update.
Okay, thank you for that. Moving to board member reports on committee meetings. Would you like to go first, Mr. McNally?
Okay, the policy committee met on January 30th. All board members were present. We have citizen comment from Heather Kamen on intra-district transfer policy. And our discussion items were policy 730, student assignment and intra-district transfer. Mr. Buxton recapped the conversation from our November policy committee meeting centered around student assignment and intra-district transfers for elementary students. Questions for the board to consider are, does the district want to maintain the waiver program and make it a one-time decision that affects the student's entirety of his or her elementary experience inclusive of siblings? And once the district assigns someone through administrative placement, if the family decides to stay at the place school after capacity opens at the school, at the student's school, homeschool, will the district continue to pay for transportation for the family and or student? Mr. Buxton presented 4 potential scenarios that the board can consider related to that policy. Board members are considering the final scenario presented. Once approved, intra-district policy transfer policy would remain in effect throughout the duration of the elementary attendance, as long as the student remains as a resident of the district. No transportation for year 2 of administrative placement. Board will revisit this policy once they're able to review the demographer's report being presented at a special business services committee meeting on February 23rd. And then we discussed press policies and revisions. And the board received the policy packet from press in advance of the meeting. Dr. Gordon asked members if there are any policies they would like to highlight and discuss. Mrs. McCabe asked about the following policies. Policy 2-150, committees currently list our committees, including a citizen advisory committee. The board does not currently have a CAC. The recommendation is to modify the policy, removing the CAC and adding an language indicating that the board can choose to add a committee. Policy 310, goals and objectives, currently states the board commitments. The commitments are not a reflection of the current board. The oath of office is in the school code, and every board member takes the oath of office when seated. The oath of office can be referenced in this policy. The recommendation is to modify the policy by removing the commitments currently stated and by adding a reference to the oath of office. And future agenda items for our next meeting on March 23rd will include reviewing the demographer study and revisiting policy 730, a student assignment and intra-district transfer. And the meeting was adjourned at 5:56 p.m.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. McNally. Learning and teaching.
Okay, so learning and teaching met back on January 17th at 5:30. It's funny, there was a lot of kind of organic connections tonight to a number of the topics that we had been discussing, both in our planning meetings as well as the meeting that we had back on the 17th. I would encourage the community to go back and take a look at the presentation and the recording. So there was a lot of robust discussion, but again, a lot of connections this evening when we were discussing the strategic plan as well as the equity committee. So a couple of things, just things that we're doing right now. This little background about how math is being shifted in Illinois and an effort to move readiness in the right direction, which of course is a big initiative for this district. So as Paul mentioned earlier, transparency about where we're doing well and where we have areas of need. And so an emphasis on a focus of a few priority standards at each of the grade levels. Coherence, so building on the prior learning and the foundations so that we can see higher level achievement moving forward. There were some discussions regarding the rigor of what we're doing, so some measurable outcomes. And so a focus on developing procedural skill and fluency, conceptual understanding, and real world application. Again, results driven initiatives so that we can see the fruits of these labors. Previously, I think the instruction had been focused primarily on procedural skill and fluency. So correct me if I'm wrong there. So certainly a stronger emphasis on that results driven initiative. And I kind of broke it down into the why and the how, right? So the why being a focus on the discourse. So students developing an understanding to encourage a deeper learning and a deeper understanding of the information, but also group discussion so that they could articulate both their thoughts and communicate their ideas as how they're arriving at these answers. And then working together to understand and ultimately solve the problem. So naturally there's correct answers to these challenging discussions. And we'll talk a little bit about our observations that some of us were fortunate to have in the schools, but naturally there is a desired outcome, a correct answer. And then we're working on the discourse and the discussion to ensure that each of the various learning styles can learn in these environments. So the why, again, focus on discourse. And then the teachers, their role in this is engaging the students, right? Creating and cultivating that environment, which by my observations, they certainly did so. Listening and encouraging that collaboration. So we saw the students break out into different groups, small group, large group, and even pairs. And then connecting that thinking to both the learning goals and the outcomes. And then the how, and we heard a lot of discussion, so I won't go into my big diatribe on the professional learning communities and the necessity for those. And I think Paul was bringing up this point earlier, right? Applying that math discourse in instruction. So the district, it's incumbent upon the district then to provide the high quality professional development, right? Necessary to ensure that the knowledge and the practices are uniform, and then collaboration within those professional learning communities for each of those quality teachers. And then the common assessments, of course, utilizing the PLCs to ensure consistency and success across the district. I think we'll talk a little bit about, a couple of folks might have something to say about their personal experience with the observation. But before I get to that, did I miss anything from last week's meeting? Anything you'd like to add, Mrs. McCabe or board? So future agenda items that we'll have will be the student achievement report next month, and then an update on the iReady scores, I believe. And that meeting will be Tuesday, February 21st at 5:30 p.m. And then just last couple of items about my observations that I was fortunate to have at Bell Graham. That was back on January 30th. So we went into the classroom, we were sitting there observing very closely, and kudos to the instructor and the students for not being nervous with a bunch of people kind of hounding over them and watching them as they engage in their discourse. But essentially a challenging problem was introduced to the class. And then the environment, as I mentioned previously, was cultivated where the group really felt kind of not only safe, but compelled to really give their input of how they arrived at these answers, right or wrong. There were certainly a lot of right answers in there, and there was a couple where they were a little bit off track. And what you could find was that the ultimate goal was, of course, to arrive at the correct answer, which I don't think there's anyone who doesn't want our students to be arriving at the correct answers and performing well on these assessments. But I was impressed at the environment that was created, because even the students who were a little off were not apprehensive, to Paul's point earlier, to raise their hand and say, here's where I got this, and here's where it might have been incorrect. So this way, rather than the student who sits in the corner and is unwilling to raise their hand because they're nervous and they know they didn't have the correct answer, they were a little bit more outgoing about giving their feedback. And so that was encouraging to see. Now, naturally, as the whole board has talked about, we want to see the fruits of this labor and see it as a results-driven initiative. But certainly the environment seemed to be one that was cultivated such that these students were really excited to be learning this. Now, I was only able to observe it at the 1 grade level. So if there's others who had observations at the different grade level, if they'd like to chime in here, and then I will shut my big mouth.
Well, I was lucky enough to go see 6 classrooms. I saw 3rd grade at Richmond, 4th grade at Bell Graham, 2 classes at Thompson, and 2 classes at East. And it was a nice progression to see. The 3rd grade was a smaller group than what we saw at Bell Graham, but they were very articulate and had looked at the math problem in a variety of ways and were able to tell us why. And then they went and talked to each other. And when they came back, nope, I was wrong on that answer, but I'm willing, I now see where I made my error, which Mrs. Bell was with me and we both talked about that wasn't the way we experienced math, and that being afraid to give the wrong answer often meant you didn't raise your hand. At the middle school, there were 2 classes that we saw, and both teachers were amazing. One activity was to drop. This was 8th grade middle school. Drop a ball and measure where it bounces and where it bounces the next time and where it bounces the next time. And the teacher had done an amazing job of putting it physically in a space where kids could do this, and they were very engaged. They talked about the project. They talked about what was happening. I saw that same activity as that was 8th grade algebra. I saw it again at high school freshmen, and a little bit different. The students in that freshman algebra class, which goes back to, okay, we got to do it, were not as engaged as we saw the 8th grade. And and remember, this was a slice, about 2 or 3 minutes of a whole, it was more than that, but a whole day. The engagement level was different. So 9th grade algebra has a different look, I would suspect, than 8th grade algebra. But in all the classes, I saw geometry honors. I think Mrs. Bell, you were with me as well for that. That was just impressive. Those kids are talking to each other in ways that it was really amazing. And I think what I took and have said was seeing in our L&T meeting, the changes of the standard from what it was to what it is now, and how discourse fits. That isn't what they did all day. They had lessons, they had instruction, they had direct instruction. This was a time where they really get to talk about their thinking with math. And that I saw in all 6 classes, well done at every level. One teacher at Thompson had it differentiated because she knew her kids so well. She knew how to do the same problem in different ways. And so I walked away very impressed, and I liked a lot to hear what we were doing and then go and observe and see how it actions. So thank you for that.
I will be brief. You covered quite a bit of what I saw, since a couple of our visits happened to be together. One of the things that I will repeat that Becky said was how interesting and positive the experience was to see things that the board has talked about that we are trying to set out as goals, and then actually seeing it play out in the classroom and how well the students responded to it was pretty cool. I'm already always pretty much impressed with the amazing things our teachers do every day, but seeing it in action and the very specific ways that each teacher was doing it just a little bit differently was just really, really impressive to see, and very positive as a board member to see how well the board ideas and concepts and plans are being carried out. One of the other things that really stuck with me was the Richmond classroom. Some of the students be raising their hand and, putting out their ideas of what the answer would be. And despite, being right or being wrong, they were willing to engage, have those discussions. And it was 3rd grade, correct? And they were just all in, which was impressive, because I certainly wasn't that way in 3rd grade. I would have been in the back, not having a discussion. So the discourse part, I think, was incredibly beneficial, especially at that age. And watching the teacher and the way I did say I'd be short, I'm sorry. And the way the teacher was completely non-committal as the classes, giving her their responses. Okay, this is your answer. This is your answer. And then let's now talk about it. And one of the things, one adorable little girl said, I'm pretty sure this is wrong, but I'm going to stick with it. And this is my answer. And she was proud of that discussion. And then when she was ready and she understood she had the wrong answer, the way she corrected it, it was just really, really cool to see the whole discourse. And it's such a great experience. Granted, this is just third grade math, but this is the way this is going to play out for us to get our students across the board ready to take eighth grade algebra. I mean, this is how we're doing it. And it was awesome.
And last thing I'll add there, just thank you for that feedback too. I neglected to mention that I believe it's the district's intention for us to be able to continue to have these experiences as well, so that we can see the things that we're chatting about here at the board table and in the various committees, these results-driven initiatives, and give us a chance for us to be able to observe them firsthand. And I certainly enjoyed that and look forward to those opportunities in the future.
Okay, thank you very much for that update. And last week would be business services.
Okay, Business Services Committee met on Monday, January 30th. All the members of the board were present and several members of administration. We had no citizens' comments. There was a discussion or a review of the Mid-Valley December financial statement with no issues of concern. There was the discussion of the December 31st financial report for D303, again with no issues. There was a designation of the individual to prepare the fiscal year budget for this coming year, 23-24. You'll notice on the consent agenda, the designation of Justin Attaway to prepare this year's budget. There was a discussion of the calendar associated with that budget creation as well, and that is also on the consent agenda for today. There was a discussion around food service in the Business Services Committee, and the idea of maintaining both providers that we have today, both Quest and Organic Life, for the coming school year was discussed, and that contract will be brought back to us for future consideration. Remember, this is a different decision than going for one consolidated contract for that single year. It doesn't change, and in the discussion we discussed, doesn't change the necessity next year to go out for a broader RFP for food service. There was a discussion about sharing the costs of West Chicago crossing guard, and you'll see the intergovernmental agreement is on the consent agenda today. I think that's on consent for today. I just wanted to point out that the cost associated with that was discussed in great detail, and it's much less expensive to share the costs with West Chicago than it is to hire that crossing guard through D303 alone. There was a discussion of the Mage Johnstone building roof replacement for excuse me, for Mid-Valley, and you'll see the bid is on the consent agenda today, the suggested bid. Further discussion around the disposal of surplus equipment, you'll see that on the consent agenda, and the facilities team, John Pullman and team, presented a recommendation to purchase a new truck that can really help us through snow plowing and take out of service, out of line service, one that's faltering. You'll see that on the consent agenda. Mr. Smith presented a request or a recommendation that we purchase Palo Alto firewalls to really protect the internet access in buildings when the primary route to the internet is down, such that when we fall into that fallback, we have protection for all the schools and school buildings. That is also on the consent agenda. The meeting adjourned at 6:36, and the next meeting is on the 27th of this month. Any questions?
Okay, great. Thank you for those updates. Does anyone have any other additional committee updates related to DPTO or anything like that? Any intergovernmental, any updates there? Okay. All right. With that said, then we will move on to item number 4 on the agenda, which is our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda items 4A through 4PP?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Bell. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lackner. Does anyone have the desire to remove something from the consent agenda? Okay. Is there any discussion? Okay, Ms. Marsan, would you please take roll for the vote?
Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
and Mrs. Fairgreen.
Yes, the motion passes 6-0. Moving on now to item number 5 on the agenda, which is our 4 actions section. Item A, the Handle with Care Memorandum of Understanding. Do I have a motion to approve the Handle with Care Memorandum of Understanding?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Bell. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Kuschert. Is there any discussion?
I'd like to add that I don't see in the memorandum any requirement from the police department to talk with the parents about the fact that they'll be notifying the school. And I don't see that parental consent reflected in here, so I'll vote no against this memorandum of understanding.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
Is that something that could be addressed?
I can bring it back to the St. Charles Police, but the intent is not to. It is literally just intended to let the staff know that there was a situation that occurred for the student. It is not to identify the situation, it is not to notify staff of what it was, what it wasn't. It was just to say, hey, just be looking out for this young person. There was a significant event that happened in this young person's life.
I think Mr. Lackner brings up a good point, and I probably should have brought that up earlier as well. Is there a situation where we think that the discussion with the parents would be warranted prior to this? Has that discussion occurred at all?
That would be with the police department. They're just notifying us that a significant issue occurred that may impact that young person in the school day.
And I don't even think they're identifying the issue, correct?
Correct. There is no issue. It is not talking about the situation. Was it a parent? Was it something that happened in the home or outside? It is just saying, hey, watch out. The young person could be struggling today.
Yeah, I remember the discussion we had regarding that it would be quite vague when they just let folks know that the student may be struggling in school. And so there would be no follow-up to that discussion, no additional details.
No, it is there. It is literally handle with care.
Okay.
If they call it for Paul, it is like handle with care. And we know that we just need to, if the student is reporting or exhibiting signs, it's not like just because somebody calls in that we're going down immediately. It is, you're showing signs, you're coming to seek support, just have a little bit more, just an awareness for that young person.
And if memory serves me correctly, this mirrors what some other districts are doing as well with their
Correct.
municipalities.
Correct.
Do you think it would warrant expansion on that? Just that we're kind of mirroring some other things?
We are absolutely
proposing?
mirroring other police departments and school districts around the state. That's where this came from. We're the different police departments who are working with different school districts, and St. Charles Police Department came to us with this.
So we are assuming, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I need to do that to you. We are assuming that the police are properly notifying parents of whatever might require parental notification.
Whatever all of they're doing, they're notifying us of a situation that occurred in a young person's life. So I assume, knowing the St. Charles Police, that they will do an exceptional job of notifying whomever they need to, but that's not something that
It would not be in our purview.
it would not be in our purview.
My recollection of the conversation was it was more of there was some sort of event. Just maybe provide a little more compassion today. Should there be anything out of the ordinary for the student, there may be an underlying reason. There was, from my recollection, there's no details shared, nothing whatsoever, just Jimmy, Johnny, Julie, whatever, fill in whatever name you like, may need an extra bit of compassion today. End of story. And then there was nothing further. There's no, you need to provide this, that, call parents. We don't know anything. The district would not know anything other than please be a little extra compassionate today.
Any other points of discussion or questions? Okay.
So we would assume then that every parent that whose family has an interaction with the police should recognize that that police will send an email to D303 about the fact that their family has had an interaction with the police.
Not any
No.
That's
interaction.
what
In the MOU, victim or witness experiences
A traumatic event.
traumatic event, exposed to trauma, child
I-
custody,
With
visitation.
all due respect, I see all of the listings, but I also see, should a law enforcement officer be uncertain as to whether or not to give notice to the school, judgment should be exercised in favor of notification. It's not an exhaustive list. It's simply a list of examples. So I'm trying to get clarity on when would they not? Is any interaction with the police that the police decides a child has been exposed to trauma in the home going to be notified to the district? And it seems that the answer is yes.
It will ultimately be the St. Charles Police Department making that decision.
So is there potentially a need for us to clean up this language to maybe avoid some of that ambiguity before putting this to a vote? I'd just like to discuss with the board and see what your thoughts are.
Well, the other point I would make of clarification, I think an assumption is being made that the violence or trauma is happening in the home. It could be anywhere that one of our students is involved in some type of situation. The family may not even be involved.
I guess the concern, it sounds like Mr. Lackner has the same concern I do, is that the family should be involved. Perhaps be involved at least by being notified, and I'd feel more comfortable knowing that they were notified. I'm
Well, and that would be St. Charles Police Department's protocol,
right.
whatever that is.
I don't agree with Mr. Lackner's passion about it, but I do hear what his message is. Is there a way we could table this and ask the St. Charles Police if they could relay to us their process? I think most likely the chances are that we would naturally find out that the child has had some kind of experience. Kids don't come to school without expressing it. But that is not what this is about. This is about we're intergovernmental people working together to protect kids. However, what Mr. Lackner's point should maybe be examined more before we vote, because I don't know that we have all the answers right now. So is that a possibility to just have further discussion with the St. Charles Police before we vote?
You would have to pull this.
Yes,
Yeah, and
because
then
we have
we
a
could-
motion
yep.
now on the table. So
We can motion to table this until further clarification, if that's what the board chooses to do.
So Mrs. McCabe, I actually agree with you, and given some of the items that Mr. Lackner brought up, I know that this was brought forth with the best of intentions, no question. I was loosely involved with these discussions. So I do know that there are the best of intentions, but I do think that there are some noteworthy things brought up here that could maybe just clear up some things for the community members, some of the parents in the community, and then we could bring this forth to really just make a better sound decision. I suspect that if there's a little bit of clarity and a little bit of cleanup of the language, I think we could probably arrive with, the board in agreement on this item. I came in here feeling very strongly about this and in support of this, but I do think that there are some good points that have just been brought up, and I think it might be worthy just to clean this up and bring it back so that we can, approach unanimity on this.
okay.
Motion to table the,
Yeah, so do I have a motion to strike the current motion that's on the table and to defer this to a later point at which we have the opportunity to engage with St. Charles Police Department for further clarification?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bell and Mr. Lackner for the second. Ms. Marsan, would you please take the vote?
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
and Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes, motion passes 6-0. Moving on to item B, Northern Kane County Regional Vocational System Intergovernmental Agreement. Do I have a motion to approve the Northern Kane County Regional Vocational System Intergovernmental Agreement?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. McCabe. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Bell. Is there any questions or discussion? Okay, Ms. Marsan, please take the roll for vote.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
and Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes, motion passes 6-0. Moving on to item number C. We do have SCESP Memorandum of Understanding regarding substitutes. Do I have a motion to approve the SCESP Memorandum of Understanding regarding substitutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. McCabe. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. McNally. Any questions or discussion on this item?
I think it would be good just so that we can kind of clarify precisely what this is, because this was a kind of a point of discussion. I don't think there was any contention on it, but
So
Thank
this
you.
is simply just to clarify the language that is already in the contract and to add one group. So one group was left out of this completely that is a part of the ESP group, and they were not acknowledged and when they are substituting what they would receive as compensation. So the compensation all stayed the same. It's just clarifying how and when they would get that compensation.
Can you expand on the group that was excluded?
It was the after the speech TAs, I believe it was. Yes.
Anything else, Mr. McNally?
no, I just wanted clarity. I know it was something discussed. It was not
Yep.
controversial. I just wanted it to be known what it was about.
Okay. Very good. Anything else? Okay. Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call for vote?
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
and Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes, motion passes 6-0. And on a side note, Mrs. Conlon, thank you for coming up and providing the context.
Also, could I just interject here? I want to thank Mr. Lackner for making your statement as to why you were voting no. Often we don't say why we're voting no, and I think because you did, you gave us pause, and I appreciate that. So thank you very much.
Item D, settlement agreement and release for the KR Miller Contractors, Inc. litigation. Do I have a motion to approve settlement agreement and release with KR Miller Contractors, Inc. to resolve case number 2021-L-51 in the Circuit Court of Kane County?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lackner, and thank you, Mr. Kuschert, for the second. Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote?
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
and Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes, motion passes 6-0. Moving to item number 6 on our agenda is for information. So there are 4 standing items that are in your packet included for informational purposes. So our District 303 financial report, the Mid-Valley financial report, Freedom of Information Act requests, and our district enrollment. For item number 7, new business. Does anyone have any new business at this time that they would like to bring forward? Okay. Moving to item number 8, which is citizen comments. And we do not have any citizen comments at this time. And so with that, we will move to item number 9, which is closed session. Do I have a motion to adjourn to closed session for the purpose of the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, specific individuals who serve as independent contractors in a park, recreational, or educational setting, or specific volunteers of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee, a specific individual who serves as an independent contractor in a park, recreational, or educational setting, or a volunteer of the public body, or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity.
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Bell. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lackner. Ms. Marsan, would you please take a roll call vote for adjourning to closed session?
Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner.
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
and Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes, motion passes 6-0. We will now adjourn to closed session at 7:36 PM. Okay, we are now resuming open session of the D303 board meeting on Monday, February 13th, 2023 at 9:09 PM. Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mrs. Bell,
Here,
Mr. Kuschert,
Here.
Mr. Lackner,
Here.
Mrs. McCabe,
Here.
Mr. McNally,
Here.
and Mrs. Fairgrave.
Here. And with that, for item number 11, which is for action on the agenda, do I have a motion to table the notice of remedial warning of a teacher?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Lackner. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Kuschert. Ms. Marsan, would you please take roll call for a vote?
Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
yes.
and Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes, the motion passes 6-0. Now, moving to item 12 on the agenda, do I have a motion to adjourn to closed session for the purposes of A, collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees. B, discussion of minutes of meetings lawfully closed under the Open Meetings Act, whether for purposes of approval by the body of the minutes or semi-annual review of the minutes as mandated by section 2.065 of Illinois Code. Item C, the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, specific individuals who serve as independent contractors in a park, recreational, or educational setting, or specific volunteers of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee, a specific individual who serves as an independent contractor in a park, recreational, or educational setting, or a volunteer of the public body, or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity.
So
Thank you, Mrs. McCabe. May I have a second, Mr. McNally?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Marsan, would you please take a roll call vote to adjourn to closed session?
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
and Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes, motion passes 6-0. We will now adjourn to closed session at 9:12 PM.